Hey everybody, Adam here with Hometown Acres. We are back here with Matt from Firewood Guy. If you guys caught a video a few weeks ago, we had a demo day with Matt here with the Eastonmade 48C. And in that video, we kind of teased that we were going to do a follow-up video on that, on analyzing the purchasability of a machine like that for you here.
Yeah.
And if you guys know our story, Matt and I are both ex-accountants and both turned firewood guys. A little different career path. You have gone full-fledged into the firewood business.
Yeah.
I've gone into the YouTube side of the firewood business. But you know, we both think the same in terms of how we kind of crunch numbers. And I know from talking to you guys, whenever we go to trade shows like the Paul Bunyan show, I always ask people, what do you guys like about the videos? And a lot of people say, I really like when you delve into the numbers, because most people don't think that way.
Right.
So I'm curious, just as much as you guys are, about somebody who's deep into the firewood business. How do you analyze purchasing a big piece of equipment like that? Because it's not a small purchase.
Well, usually I decide that I want it, and then I make the numbers make sense so that I can buy it.
Yeah.
No, but there's a way to, I guess, make the numbers whatever you want them to be. I think we found that out through working through numbers. We found some surprising things and some unsurprising things, and we kind of like to nerd out on the numbers a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, fair warning, we're gonna head inside Matt's office here in a little bit and look at his spreadsheet that you use pretty regularly to determine whether a piece of equipment is justifiable for purchasing or not. So I guess without further ado, let's head in there and go look at the numbers.
All right.
All right, so now we are in Matt's office here, and I've got to say this is probably the nicest office I've seen a firewood guy have. But so tell me a little bit about this spreadsheet here, and most importantly, what was the quote that Eastonmade gave you for that 48C? I think that's what everybody's going to want to know, is how much does a piece of equipment like that cost?
Right. So they published it on their website. I don't think it's a secret. The processor itself is $175,000. And most guys are going to want that with a conveyor because it's going to make so much wood so fast, you got to get rid of it. So
it's basically pointless without
something to take the wood away. So the conveyor is $14,200. You have some commissioning and training that come up to between freight, commission, and training, $4,000 for a grand total of $193,200. That, however, is not the only cost you need to consider when buying a piece of equipment, because most people that make a significant purchase are going to finance at least a portion of it. And even if you are fortunate enough to be able to write a check, you still should quantify some time value of money expense to putting that money in this piece of equipment versus a different investment, like maybe a stock on the stock exchange, or
even if you're not saving, or if you're not paying the interest and you had that money in the stock market, you could be making 6.5% in the stock. So there's an opportunity cost by tying that money up with a firewood processor versus using it somewhere else that you could make money with it as well.
So for general assumptions, I think 6.5% is a pretty good commercial lending rate, or a pretty good, probably a pretty weak return in the stock market, but just for calculation purposes, that's the number I chose. Would bring your total monthly principal and interest to $3,780, with total 5-year interest of $33,610. So we would take the 193 from above, we would add the 33,611 to come up with a total equipment plus interest of $226,811. That is the today price of the piece of machinery. If you're going to finance this, you're going to give smaller amounts of money over time, adding up to this sum total.
So I see you have two separate columns in here. Before we kind of get into the weeds, explain the difference between your cash flow analysis and your units of production analysis.
Right. So the cash flow analysis is what you'll see some better equipment manufacturers give you, and it's purely to dictate like an affordability. Like, is this machine affordable to me? Can I make that payment? And if I break that payment over my units produced, what does that come to for a cost per cord?
Right.
How do you analyze a machine when you don't know what your production rate is going to be, or you don't know what your units sold are going to be, because this machine is going to increase your capacity. So where you might have been at your limits at 1,000 cords per year, maybe with an upgraded processor, you're at 2,000 or 3,000 cords per year. So you have to find a way to price that out so that you're like, okay, this makes sense. And that's where I would analyze it after the cash flow analysis. I would look at the units of production, or the simplest way to put that is the machine is going to produce so many units in its life, regardless of how long it takes me to produce those units.
So whether you're producing 1,000 cords a year or 3,000 cords a year, that's going to influence how quickly the machine depreciates, essentially.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, hypothetically, under a units of production system, if you bought the processor and produced 0 cords and didn't use the machine at all, it would depreciate 0 under this calculation.
Which isn't 100% true. It would depreciate some, but it would depreciate a lot less. It's like a 1960 Corvette that's been sitting in the garage with 5,000 miles on it that hasn't been driven. It's, well, in that case, I guess it would appreciate. But you get what I'm saying, right? That something that hasn't been used but is still new is almost worth a new price if it hasn't been run through the ringer. So,
and when you talk about breaking down equipment or capital costs, there's a million ways to do it. I mean, just from our accounting history, there's straight line depreciation, there's double declining balance, there's units of production, and it's kind of a marrying of all these things to try and get a pretty good picture of what fits your business.
Yeah. So I don't know if you hit on this, but the cash flow analysis, I think we did talk about, gives you kind of a snapshot of the affordability of the machine, and then the units of production, assuming you can afford it, then gives you an idea of the profitability of the machine, I think is the best way to summarize it before we get kind of down deep into the numbers.
Right. And so the next phase here would be to divide your total equipment and interest over the 5-year note or the 5-year life that you're assigning the machine, which is pretty standard for equipment. Leads you with a $45,300 expense every year that you have to cover. If we're producing 1,000 units per year, that's $45.36 per unit or per cord, just in the capital expense of the equipment. That doesn't include your labor, your maintenance, the cost of the wood, any of those other outside factors.
Which it looks like that's where you get to next.
Yeah, so the next string of costs is broken down by cords. So if I buy a triaxle load of wood, I'm buying that for $1,250. My average yield is 7.67 cords. Comes out to about $163 a cord.
And when Matt says that he's getting 7.67 average yield cords on a truck, that number is probably pretty accurate, because I know you measure all of this stuff.
I do.
Whenever he gets a new piece of equipment, I mean, when you got the Penosa in, you were telling me all these different tests you were going to run and data that you were going to collect and all this stuff. So I imagine that 7.67, you got that number dialed in pretty well. And if you have a log truck that's coming in, or a logger that's bringing you truckloads consistently that are 6.5 cords, they're probably not going to be bringing you logs for very long.
No, that's absolutely right. And then I did throw in some numbers for when you run specifically the 16-way wedge. These numbers are going to change based on differing wedges in your processor. If you're running a 6-way, a 4-way, or the 16-way is going to make more kindling or more waste than your 6-ways will, just because of obvious things I don't think we need to cover.
Yeah.
So these are the numbers that we pulled from the day that we demoed the processor.
Yep.
I did add back $3.05 for the ability to use that material elsewhere in the process.
Okay.
Grinding it for mulch or burning it in our waste wood kilns.
Which other people may not have that ability, but you do.
Right.
It's a factor in your
Exactly.
business.
Or you could repurpose the kindling into bundles and maybe even net better than the $13 cost. You might get back $26, so then this number actually becomes a negative in your calculation.
Yeah.
So this is all very specific, this part of it, to each business.
So, and another thing that we did here in the spreadsheet is every cell that is not highlighted is a fixed number. Anything that is highlighted in yellow is a variable that you can change within the spreadsheet to kind of tweak the numbers one way or the other, which we kind of joked about in the beginning. If you really like that processor, you can take some of these numbers and, you know, if your formula doesn't give you an answer you like, you can tweak these numbers to give you an answer you do like.
Right.
And then the green numbers are just kind of your...
Like draw attention to the fact that in the two columns where the two numbers are
equal,
identical, right?
Yeah.
The numbers that I think matter most to people is the overall big ticket price.
Yep.
And then we get down to labor. This is another one where there's a lot of variability in
different
markets, quality of workers, what you're paying, what you have to pay. $25 is a pretty good rate in our area.
Yeah.
You might find that your number's a lot higher or even lower than this. And then payroll taxes, general rule 9%, covering the employer portion of payroll taxes. And then my experience with workers' comp, I'm pretty good. I don't have any claims. I get a pretty good rate, so I'm $1.88 for every $25 spent for a $43.69 per machine hour. If you notice the one yellow number here, 1.5 is number of workers. Well, how do you get a half of a worker, right?
Right.
And with the Eastonmade 48C, in order to see that 3 cords production rate, you're not going to do that with one guy.
Right.
You're going to have one guy in the cab making wood, and you're going to have another guy that's keeping logs on the deck and keeping wood moved away from the conveyor. And I'm thinking a guy should be able to do half of his time spent on that.
If he's running a wheel loader, you come over, load some logs, go over to a different part of the business, move some mulch or slabs or whatever, come back, load the log deck again, go back, do something else.
Exactly. And I obviously didn't wrap in any, support equipment cost into that number. That's just the labor portion.
Yeah.
And then fuel, Mark had estimated 2.5 gallons per hour for consumption on that machine. Right now, my average cost of off-road diesel's $2.84.
I need to come buy my off-road diesel from you.
Right.
I think I'm paying like $3.10 a gallon.
Right. So the total fuel cost ends up coming out to like $7. So even if, just for giggles, let's say that number's low. What do you, 280? Yeah. It's not a huge change, even though fuel is definitely something you need to be concerned with.
Yeah.
It's not the most expensive item on the list. Maintenance per hour, that's the surprising part, I think. The blade maintenance, when we talk about a circle saw machine versus a bar saw machine, 50 cents per hour for circle saw maintenance is like really attractive.
Yeah.
Because I'm used to the chain loops and the bars and the maintenance on the bars and sharpening chains. And I'm totally relying on Eastonmade's data here because I don't have any experience with this.
Yeah.
So I threw in a miscellaneous number for just greasing and incidentals of 60 cents a machine hour. And then the 500-hour service interval covers like your basic engine oil service, engine filters, fuel filters, fluids, that stuff. And so that comes out to $52.89 per machine hour, and that's your labor, fuel, maintenance. And then I have to translate that to dollars per cord.
Right.
Because we're producing more than one unit per machine hour at $21.16. Then this drills down to $241.50 per cord.
See, that's why, everybody always says it's tough to make money doing wood, and you have to do it at scale to make money. And the guys out there that are selling wood for $180, $200 a cord or whatever, now they're putting a lot of sweat equity into that wood, right? They're the weekend warriors. They enjoy doing it.
Right.
If you're going to try to grow a business doing this with machinery and equipment and be profitable at it, you cannot sell wood for $200 a cord.
No. And the largest number, if you want to talk about the one that's driving that cost the most, it's the cost of the wood.
Yeah.
And if you're a weekend warrior, this number is probably zero.
You're getting it out of your woods, or you're driving around in your pickup truck and you see down trees along the side of the road and you're cutting them up with your chainsaw and taking them with you.
Right. And good luck making 1,000 cords of wood that way. That's where it becomes the scale thing, where you have to start buying these things and paying other people to
be a part of the process.
Right, part of the process, multiply your volume.
Yeah.
And
so real quick, let's just, for S&Gs is the political way to say it.
Right.
Your cost per load, if you change that to 900, what would that change your cost per cord down below? So that would take you from, what was it, 225 to 191?
I think it was 241.
241.
We'll go back just to be sure.
241, and if you go to 900 to 191. Now, here's the other thing. You can get log truck loads of wood for $900, but they're probably, we were talking about this before, the difference between firewood poles and scrag poles, right?
Yeah, you can. I do buy loads for $900. They're not the poles that you're going to run across the 48C and see all of the benefits of that 16-way wedge. So if you're going to buy $900 loads of poles, they're going to be more crooked. They're going to be smaller diameter.
So you're not going to get. So okay. Again, so if you're buying, in this situation, if you're buying $900 loads of logs, if you go up to your cords per hour and reduce your production rate with cheaper wood going in, that's going to slow down your production rate to maybe 1.5 or something.
Right, I would say.
And so does that change your cost down below, your total all-in cost? 212. So that's the cool thing about this spreadsheet is you can play with these numbers and again make or break whether you should buy a piece of equipment or not.
Right, and that's the dangerous part when you're looking at these numbers on a machine-specific basis. You have to be careful of how that machine fits into the rest of the process. So you would need to look at these loads of logs for 900 in a little more detail. You'd have to look at your production rate in a little more detail. Mm-hmm. This is serving as a guide of things that move costs in one direction or another, but don't serve as like a whole shot. This is the way to do it. This is the way to go.
Yeah, this spreadsheet is not a silver bullet. Like you plug this into your business and plug in these numbers and it'll give you a yes, buy, or no, do not buy, because there's so many different ways to look at this. But if you're one of those guys that buys equipment based on, ooh, it's shiny and new and pretty and it makes wood really fast, this may just open your eyes to some different things to consider before pulling the trigger.
Right. And if we go let's change it back to 1250. Let's move the production rate back to 3. And then if we've covered this in adequate measure, we can move on to the units of production and kind of walk through those numbers comparatively. So what I chose to do, and this isn't exactly what I would do if analyzing this myself. I'm doing this in a way that is be easier to follow, easier to communicate. So when you look at it on units of production, the thing we found most interesting about the spreadsheet, or I did anyways, was the cost per unit doesn't change whether you do 1,000 cords a year or you do 5,000 cords a year. Mm-hmm. Because you're saying the machine still costs $193.2. Mm-hmm. We're still adding in the $33,610 of interest expense to come up to the total machine cost of $226. And then the big difference here is I'm pulling out a residual value. And this residual value represents what I estimate I can sell the machine for in the open market after I have used it for what I project to use it for. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying, I'm going to put 4,000 hours on this machine, and then I'm going to decide it's someone else's turn. And I'm going to get another one, or I'm going to upgrade to a larger one. Mm-hmm.
And I think we had talked about that residual value number of roughly 116 is very conservative.
Yeah, we talked to Andrew.
Yep.
We talked to Mark. We went on the forestry trader websites, looked at some used processors out there in the marketplace, and I thought, wow, these things do hold their value pretty well.
Yeah.
So I found that this number is probably a little more conservative than what we might experience in real life.
Yeah, Andrew said for a 4-year-old, 4,000 hour, again, Eastonmade just bought Bell's Machining last year, so there are no 4-year-old Eastonmade 48Cs on the market. But we went and looked at some Bell's Machining 4,000, 6,000 series processors, and Andrew was telling us that the residual value of those machines should be somewhere in the ballpark of 145, 150,000. So I mean, if you think, you're going to put 1,000 hours on it a year for 4 years, and it's 175,000 to begin with, and you're only going to depreciate 25,000 over those 4 years,
It's kind of like, why not?
buy 3 of them, right?
Yeah, and so I'm assuming, just for purposes of the spreadsheet, I'm going to put 4,000 hours in the machine. This puts my depreciation rate at $27.72 per machine hour. Mm-hmm. And based on a 3 cords an hour production rate, my cost per cord is $11.09 versus the cash flow method at $45.36.
And again, that's back to the difference between the affordability side of it versus the profitability side of these two ways to analyze it.
Right. So when you look at the cash flow method or the cash flow analysis, the more units you do per year, it's going to have a proportionate effect on your cost per cord, because it's assuming that your finance cost or your capital cost is the fixed item. It's $45,000 per year, no matter if you do 1 cord or you do 10,000 cords. This units of production side assumes your production rate is variable and your production units are fixed, like the hours on the machine. Mm-hmm. You're going to run 4,000 hours. It doesn't matter if you run all 4,000 hours in year 1, or if you run 100 hours in year 1, 500 hours in year 2, your costs are pretty well the same. And we've got, like, from the wood down, these costs are all the same from column to column, coming down to cost per cord of $207.23.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we talked about there's a number of different ways to calculate this. These are not the only 2 ways. But given one method is showing, your cost per cord is 241, your cost per cord on the units production method is 207, you could probably take an average of those two and say you're probably somewhere in the middle, right, of those. So there's a reason we both quit our jobs as accountants to do Firewood, and that was to get out of the office, which is what we've done here to come out here and wrap this video up. So, all right, so now you know what your cost per cord is with a machine like that under both scenarios. I think probably somewhere in the middle is a good number to consider as your cost per cord, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So now that you know that, how do you take that information and decide, yes, you should buy or no, you shouldn't buy?
Well, I would immediately take it to a comparison, either to another model machine I'm considering or a machine or a process I already have. And I would say, whatever that difference is, say it's $200 a cord with this machine or $215 a cord with that machine, they're each going to have their pros and cons. Mm-hmm. And you've got to determine whether that difference in cost is valuable to you.
It shines light on other parts of the calculation too, like initial investment. If you're only going to save $5 per cord, and one machine is $300,000, another one is $150,000, then you get the cheaper machine and make.
Unless you're doing 10,000 cords.
True, where $5 a cord makes a difference.
Right.
And we were talking about the $1,250 or $1,200 per triaxle load versus the $900 per triaxle load. If you're buying higher quality logs going into the processor, and you said that if you were buying $900 triaxle loads, you wouldn't want to use the 48C because it's finely tuned to have a cycle time of 4 seconds to cut, split, make 16 pieces of wood.
Right.
And if you're buying the $900 loads of logs that are they're going to be more crooked, not quite as big, then the 48C is not going to have as much value to you. You'd rather take a lesser expensive processor and use that.
Yeah, for my business and the way that it works, that's what I would say. The $1,200 loads are a minimum need for a 48C processor, because to utilize the benefit of the productivity, you're going to have to run good wood.
Yeah. It's garbage in, garbage out, if otherwise.
Right. You know, like I think we said, like tree service wood, the 48C is probably not going to do great.
Yeah.
You know, if you're getting great big yard trees, a lot of crooked stuff, big knotty stuff, and the 48C shines with 14-inch diameter, 18-inch diameter wood, fairly straight poles, just banging out production.
Yeah.
And
it's worth it to probably buy, because I think we talked about, you're going to get 3 cords per hour if you've got nice straight grain telephone pole trees going through. And if you are buying the $900 tracks of loads, you might drop down to 1.5 cords or 2 cords an hour.
Right.
Neither of us knows because we haven't run it.
Right.
We're just kind of guessing.
And sometimes when you start into business with certain customers, there's a minimum level of volume that's required to even, it's like a barrier of entry, right? They're not going to talk to you if you can only produce 1 tractor trailer load of packaged firewood a year. It's like, yep, don't bother.
Yeah.
And so you've got to find a way to scale the business to the point where you can keep all the kilns running, you can keep the wood processed, you can keep the wood being packaged, so you can keep full-time employees and steady employment, and that takes high volume production.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot more to it than just the spreadsheet. There's a lot of intangibles that you can't put a number to. We've kind of talked about that already. So I think at this point you probably still don't know whether you're going to buy it or not.
I know I want to make it work.
Yeah.
I know that because I like the machine. I think it's really well built. We just got to drill down the finer numbers, and I might find myself 6 months from now going, it doesn't matter if I want to or not, I need to.
Yeah.
Because of other factors that might change.
Yeah.
So.
Well, anyway, guys, there you go. There you have your answer. There's roughly about Matt's cost per cord. Well, not exactly. We fudged some numbers here and there to keep some of his information private. But yeah, as of right now, he still doesn't know whether he's going to buy the 48C or not, but I want him to, because I want to come up here and actually get to run it myself. So
Right. We're thinking about putting Adam on the payroll part-time. Yeah. Get him out here, get him dirty.
Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give me a big thumbs up, click that subscribe button, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.